Alright, we're back playing home now. Lost in the forest. Yeah, we just got in yet. Eventually we'll be lost. In the deep patches of the woods. I actually forgot that back in that basement I could have used those keys to get in the door and find out what's on the cave. I didn't. We gotta change something inside. Trampled into the dirt and grass where a plastic card brushed it off and was surprised to see it was my credit card. I wasn't sure if it was still usable, but it was mine. I didn't take back the credit card. I pocketed the credit card. Hopefully I could find my driver's license too. Little lost. Ooh. There was a fire pit here, and it was still a bit warm, and a few embers still burned at the bottom. Two folding camping chairs were on the ground. One was knocked over. There were a couple of cans of beer spilled on the ground. The cheap dome tent slept two people. I shone my flashlight inside and could see some bedrolls, two backpacks and a food. Let's disturb the people. Oh, more bush people. There were some personal effects shoved back into the rock. Wait, there's a notebook there too. Did I read it? Inside the cheap dollar store notebook was page after one page of names and lists. None of it made much sense. The newest page contained several names. Olivia, Ashley, Sherry, Edward, Stephanie, Holly, Rose. Rachel! Her name was last on the list and had a mark beside in blue ink. The names Daphne and Olivia had been crossed out in the same blue ink. Cheryl, Heather, and Rose had also been crossed out. These markers old and back into the hole. And we can put this one to the hole. Ooh, building. The grimy sink had a small patch in it that looked almost clean. A musty wooden plank propped up the stall door. It didn't really seem to help. I wasn't sure why, but I took it. Wooden plank. Makeshift door. With some nose and some Jones something. The sign was the same as the first one I had seen. It must have been the exit to the other side of the woods. I finally found this. Since they left, I knew I never wanted to return. Let's go look at some notebook first. Lost as possible. Through the fence, I could see a dilapidated outfit. Wonder if I could find my way. Keep going, I'll just in. This is the entrance. The worn picnic table stood within a circle of trees like an altar. It was covered in faint markings and carvings from who I assumed were previous campers and hikers. The plank I found was long enough to form a crude bridge, but I wasn't sure if it would hold. Did I use it? Why the hell? Two bodies, two young women, were half dug into a hasty, shallow grave between the trees. The younger-looking one was still face up, her dead eyes gleaming against my flashlight. They deserved better than that. Did I clean up the graves? I tried to cover them up a bit more and close the younger woman's eyes. I fashioned a crude marker. I wasn't sure why, but I felt I had to do something. So I cross back over to the shore. Yes. Back and unlost. This one. This one. This one. This one. And here we are, the exit. The dense trees, I could finally start to see some light. I must have been at the edge of the forest, but I wasn't sure where the path ahead. I could almost feel the cryptic notebook in my pocket as I tried to think about what it could mean, and where were the campers who had abandoned this. Would I meet them too? Though the patch ahead of me was less than still, but God, it was well. Who knew what was like? As I stepped through the gate, I suddenly recognized the Arthur Potts factory where I worked as a machinist for all those years. Times had closed. Almost 3 years ago now. Times are better then. Pathetically, I think wrestling with me. Hey, it's just wind. Oh. Hold to the door. Hold. I found the body of a security guard. Just doing his job, maybe. His face was covered with blood and some kind of head wound. I wondered, was his flashlight his? Flashlight went a long way if it was his. Dug into the ground was a cracked old watch. First my wallet and now this. Did I retrieve my watch? The watch was useless, but I put it on my pistol. The lockers hung open. Contents were tossed around like someone had been looking for something. It was a large power box with 5 lights on it. Cables burst out of the box, snaking off to other parts of the factory. The metal was starting to wear, and cobwebs were collected on the corners. The box wasn't receiving. Assuming I need to hold it. The door was locked shut. A sign was pasted to the front that said, "Danger! Closed for repairs." I didn't think it would be good. I'm serious. Every part of this plant smelled old and rotten. I noticed the old bulletin board on the floor. The board contained yellow clippings of newspaper cartoons and notices. There were notes to and from the guys that worked there. One of them was to Norman, who was one of the older guys on the line. Our old break table, the layer of dust and grime only made sin sting. Oh. It's the winter. A power panel looked like it was shut off. Did I push the switch? The open locker was stuffed with dirty work clothes and old boots. There was a photo of a woman taped to the inside. It was scratched out. Her face was unrecognizable. The power panel. Shut off. Switch. Ooh. The shut tight. The rusty looking parts locked inside. It was working. And green. Let's go on. Joe had been hastily boarded up. This was Norman's locker. The door was dented like someone had punched it. That won't do it. You know about that. But I hope to help me get power. Did I push the switch? It works. A utility shelf crammed with mismatched tools and items. There was a claw hammer on the shelf. Did I take the hammer? With the hammer, I noticed it wasn't as dusty as the rest of the keys on the shelf. The locker was a complete mess. Hidden at the bottom, there was a mechanism. So the key card in the mechanism. Still wasn't working. What? The still wasn't working. Yeah. First, spin in. You can give it away. Distance. Understanding. I used the hammer, the old wooden boards came apart. I removed the planks, I left the hammer on the floor. Why? It could have been useful. This was my locker. There in the factory, so the booze. With a picture of Rachel on the inside. It looked like it had been torn. I thought I had taken that picture home in the factory. It was a mess of empty booze bottles. I wondered if that man in the house had something to do with this. He sure had a lot of alcohol at his place. And by the way, I don't know how this game ends. This is as far as I've made it. The keycard I found seemed like it would pass through the street. Did I use the There's some kind of ventilation hatch there. It looked like I could jump to the room below. My leg hurt enough as it was, but I couldn't see another option. Oh man, my leg hurt like hell. Yep. There's a crumpled up letter on the floor. It had been scratched up heavily. It was hard to make out. I tried to read it. Most of the letter was violently scratched out with what looked to be a ballpoint pen. All I could make out was, need to, just don't, drinking, need, Norman. Who is Norman writing? I stepped out of the factory, glad to be rid of its smell, its memories. I couldn't stop thinking about that room with the bottles in it. Was that God I found outside really drinking up there? What about Norman? Who had rooted through all those things? I couldn't tell where I was as I looked around, but figured I needed to get to a road, get my bearings. Maybe Norman could help. The store wasn't that far from the turn to the factory if I remembered correctly. I took it again back up and see what the slip was doing. Looking for next. The 60 miles per hour. Speed limit sign. Alright, I guess we'll